The council had come to watch a king beg water from a stone, and the stone had nothing left to give. I stood at the lip of the Nerwell with my hand flat against its rim, the way my father had and his mother before him, and I felt only heat coming up out of it, the dry breath of a throat that had not swallowed rain in 100 years. Below me the shaft went down into dark, past the old carved wolves that ringed its mouth, down to where water used to sing. Now it only echoed. When I dropped a pebble, it fell a long, shameful time before it clicked on bone-dry rock. Behind me, the whole of Surivale waited to see my face when it came up empty. "Nothing," said Havoc, my steward, low enough that only I would hear. He did not need to say it. The dust on everyone's lips said it. The rationed cup said it. The children who had stopped asking said it loudest of all. I turned from the well. The dune-court had gathered in the great open hall of the hold, no roof but the sky, walls of sun-warmed stone, the floor swept sand, and every face there was thinner than it had been a year ago. My people, my sand-wolves, gray as the dunes, lay in what shade there was with their ribs showing. And along the eastern colonnade, where the shade fell coolest, stood the ones I could not send away. The envoys of the Vatchar hold, 3 of them in green-dyed cloth that had never known real thirst, come to watch us die so they could name the price of our water roads when we did. The reach was always going to fall, their eldest had told me 3 days past, smiling. Better it fall into kind hands. I had not answered him, a king who answers that keeps answering it in his sleep. The caravan is at the south gate, Havoc said now. Refugees off the salt road, 24 half-dead traders, a healer, some children, he hesitated. They are asking for water, my lord. I almost laughed, and it would not have been a kind laugh, so I swallowed it. We have none to give. I know, send them on. To where? Havoc said, and there it was, the thing that made him worth more than the whole green-clad colonnade. He would not let me be a smaller man than I was. The next well is Vatchar's. They'll drink there and be owned there. I looked at the envoys, smiling in their shade, and something in me set its heels. Bring the caravan in, I said. They can have what I have, which is dust and my roof. Let it not be said the Ashreen turned thirst from the gate while there was a gate left standing. That was how she came into my hall, not crowned, not sung of, not on any wind of prophecy. She came in the back of a broken caravan, so gray with salt road dust that I did not see her face at first. I saw her hands. She was carrying a water skin nearly flat, a swallow left in it, no more, and she was not drinking it. She went along the line of her own people, the ones who could barely stand, and she wet their lips with her fingers, one and then the next, giving out that last swallow a drop at a time so that all of them had some and none of them had enough. She did it the way a person does a thing they have done 10,000 times. She did it without looking to see who watched. I watched, and here is the part I have never told plainly because there are no plain words for it. When her eyes came up and found me, a foreign woman, dust to the brows, nobody, a water carrier off a dying road, the heat went out of the air around me. Not the sun's heat. The other heat, the one I had carried in my chest my whole life and taken for simply being alive. It cooled. Something rose behind my teeth that I had no name for until much later, and the name, when it came, was rain. The taste of rain in a mouth that had known only dust for 100 years. My wolf did not rise. My wolf went quiet, the way a fevered man goes quiet when a cool hand finds his brow. Quiet and listening. You, I said, and my own voice surprised me. The envoys stirred in their shade. Havoc looked at me sidelong. The woman straightened. She was not afraid of me, which almost no one manages, and she was not bold about it either, which is rarer still. She only looked at me as though she were reading the far edge of a dune to judge the weather. My lord, she said. Her voice was low and a little rough from the road. We asked for water. Your man said you have none. I've given mine to my people. I'll not ask again. That is not why I called you, I said, though I could not yet have told her why I had. Then I don't know what you want of me, she said, and I'm too tired to guess, so I'll say it plainly and you can be angry if you like. We'll rest in your shade one night and be gone by dawn. We won't touch your stores. We won't beg. She lifted her chin just slightly. We've a healer among us who can set bones and bring down a fever. If your people are sick, she'll work for the roof and be glad of it. That's a fair trade for shade. That's all I have to bargain with. The eldest Vatchar envoy laughed softly. A caravan of ghosts bargaining. She did not so much as glance at him. But I saw her jaw set, and I saw her decide, the way a proud person decides, to spend no part of herself on a man not worth it. In that small refusal, she was more of a queen than anyone standing in green. What is your name? I asked. Myrn, she said. Myrn. I said it, and the rain taste came again, stronger, and I had to steady myself against it the way you steady against a slope of loose sand. You'll have the shade and the water when there is water. Your healer will be honored, not worked like a mule, and you will not leave at dawn. Why? Because the well in my chest that had been dry my whole reign had, this hour, felt the first cool breath come up out of it. But I could not say that. A king does not say that to a dust-gray stranger in front of the men come to buy his kingdom. Because I say so, I said instead, which was the worst answer I had, and she heard how poor it was, and to my surprise the corner of her mouth moved, not a smile, but the ghost of where one lived when she was not so tired. As my lord commands, she said, dry as the well, and turned back to her people. She should have been forgettable. Every reason in the world said forget her. The drought, the envoys, the ration books, the sand wolves growing too weak to hunt. A king in a dying land has no time for the turn of a woman's mouth. I did not forget her for a single hour. That first night I could not sleep. I rarely could those years, so I walked the hold as I did, past the dark barracks and the shrunken cisterns, out to the dead Nerwell where I went to be ashamed in private. And she was there. She was kneeling at the well's rim. Not praying, I would have known praying. She had her palm flat on the old carved stone, on the worn place where the well-keepers of the first days had pressed their hands in the carvings, and she had her head tilted, the way you tilt your head toward a sound almost too faint to catch. "There's water down there," she said, without turning. She'd known I was there. "Deep, old, but it's there. It hasn't gone. It's waiting." "Or held," she frowned. "Held like a breath." "There is no water," I said. "The Nerwell has been dry 100 years. My grandfather's grandfather saw the last of it. Every dowser and dune-witch from here to the salt sea has laid hands on this stone and heard nothing. I'm not a dowser." She took her hand from the stone and looked at her own palm as if it had told her a secret she wasn't sure she was allowed to repeat. "Where I come from, water's the whole of who a family is. My mother's mother's mother, we were well keepers once somewhere. That's just a story we told. But I've always," she stopped. "I always know where the water is. It's not a gift, it's just a knowing. It's kept my people alive on roads that killed everyone else's." She looked up at me, and the moon was on her face now, and the dust was washed off it by shadow, and she was, I will only say she was the first thing I had wanted to look at in a very long time. "Your well isn't dead, my lord. It's closed. There's a difference. Dead you bury, closed you open." "Then open it," I said, half a challenge, half a prayer I didn't know I was making. "I can't, not alone, not tonight." She said it plainly, not as a woman hedging a boast. "There's a lock on it I don't understand. Old, made of more than stone." She stood and brushed the sand from her knees. "But I'll tell you what I told my people, my lord, so you don't set your hope on me like a fool and hate me when it breaks. I don't know that I can open it. I only know it isn't dead. That's all I have, same as always. That's all I ever have, a knowing and no promise. Any other stranger who told me she could smell water in my dead well, I'd have thought a liar working an angle and had her watched. But she had just unasked, taken her own hope down a notch so that mine would not fall too far. That is not the work of a schemer. A schemer inflates. She had deflated to be kind to me. I had never in my life been handled so gently by someone who owed me nothing. "Myron," I said, the rain taste. "Stay, not one night." "Stay," she studied me a long moment in the moonlight. "You keep saying that," she said quietly, "and you keep not saying why." "I know. Is it the well?" "No," I said before I could be a coward about it. "The well is a reason I can say out loud. It isn't the reason." She went very still as I had gone in the hall when I first saw her, and I understood, watching her, that whatever strange, cool thing had crossed the air between us in the hall had crossed it both ways. She had felt something too. She did not have the word for it any more than I did, but she was too honest to pretend the air had not changed. "I don't know what this is," she said at last, low. "Neither do I," I said. "I only know I would rather find out than not. And that I'll not lay a hand on you nor a word of pressure. You came to my gate a free woman, and you'll leave it one if you choose, well or no well, me or no me. But I am asking you to stay long enough for both of us to learn what the air did just now." The wind moved over the dead well and made its low, mournful note. She looked at me, and the tiredness in her face had, for a moment, something under it that was not tired at all. "All right," she said. "I'll stay until we know." She stayed, and the hold changed around her, and it took me too long to see that the hold was not changing. It was waking. It began small, the way water begins. Her caravan's healer set up in the sick court, and within 3 days the fevers there had broken. But that was the healer's craft, and I noted it and moved on. What I could not move past was the sand wolves. My wolves had let no stranger near them in years. Thirst makes a wolf mean, and a starving pack is a wall of teeth. On Myron's 4th morning, I came to the kennel court, and found her sitting cross-legged in the dust with the oldest of my war wolves, gray-muzzled Sewer, laying his enormous head in her lap while she picked burrs from his ruff and told him, in a low murmur, that he was a foolish old grandfather and ought to know better than to run the ridge in this heat. Sewer, who had taken a Vacha raider's arm off at the elbow the last time the green cloth came too close, thumped his tail in the sand like a pup. And there was a pup. There should not have been. We had lost most of the year's litters to the drought, and I had grieved each one privately and told no one, because a king who weeps over pups unmans his court. But one had lived, a scrawny gray scrap we all expected to lose, and that pup had decided with the terrible certainty of the very young that Myron was its mother. It slept on her feet. It followed her at a stagger across the whole hold. When she carried water, for she insisted on carrying water, would take no idleness, said an idle guest is a rude one, the pup trotted at her heel and yipped at anyone who came near her, all 4 pounds of it fierce as a storm. That is the Alpha's pup, Havoc told her, disapproving the way he disapproved of anything he could not file. It should bond to the king, not to a— he stopped himself, glancing at me. To a water carrier, Myron finished for him without heat. It's all right, you can say it. I am one. She scooped the pup up and it burrowed into her collar. But he chose. Wolves choose. You can be cross with him about it if you like, but he won't care, and neither will I. I said nothing. I was learning to say nothing and watch, because every time I watched her the desert told me something. The wolves had chosen. The oldest of them, who remembered more than any of us, laid down their teeth for her. The pup, who was the future of the pack, had bonded to her over its own king. My people, without being told, had begun to bring their troubles to the quiet foreign woman who carried water and never spilled a drop. The woman who could tell a mother which of the dry cisterns still had a hand's depth left in the bottom when every one of them looked empty. Who found the seep in the old south wall that no one had known was there. A slow bead of water we caught in a copper bowl, a cup a day, and it was not much. But it was the first new water Surivale had found in 100 years, and the children came to watch it drip as though it were a holy thing, which it was. And every night she went to the Nurwell and laid her hand on the stone and listened, and every night the closed thing beneath it stayed closed, and every night she told me honestly that she did not yet understand the lock. It was Havoc, of all the dry old scholars in the Reach, who understood. He came to me one dusk with an armful of the oldest hold records, the crumbling ones we kept sealed against the sand, and his hands were shaking, and it was not age. My lord, he said. Well, keepers, the first ones, before the drought, before your grandfather's grandfather, the Nurwell was not opened by any king. It was opened by a keeper, a bloodline apart from the Alpha's line wed to it. The keeper's hand woke the water. The Alpha's strength held the hold. 2 lines, my lord, 2. He turned the brittle page toward me with a finger that trembled. The last keeper died in the drought with no daughter left to name. The line failed. That is why the well closed, not because the water left. Because the hand that called it was gone. The well has been waiting 100 years, my lord, not for rain. A keeper's blood to come back and knock. I looked at the carving on the page, a woman's hand pressed flat to a well rim, and above it a mark I had seen 100 times without seeing. A spiral like water turning, like a shell, like the whorl on a palm, the mark on the worn place of the Nurwell stone. The place where Myron laid her hand every night. Where, I said, and my voice was not steady, did her people say they came from? Her family, the well keepers that were. Where? Somewhere, Havoc whispered. Just a story they told, that's what she said. Well keepers once somewhere. I was already moving. I found her at the well in the last light, the pup asleep against her hip, her palm on the stone, her head tilted to that faint, far sound. Myron. I came and knelt across the rim from her so that the dead mouth of the well was between us and the first stars were coming out above it. Give me your hand. She gave it to me, not flinching, only puzzled, and I turned it palm up in the dusk, and there where the lines of her hand crossed was the whorl, the spiral, faint as an old scar, the kind of mark you are born with and never think on because it has always simply been your hand. The keeper's mark, the mark on the stone. What is it? She said. You've gone white as salt. You said your family were well keepers. Once. Somewhere, a story, she said. Just a. It is not a story, I said. It is this hold, this well. Myron, the Nurwell, is not locked against water. It is locked against everyone who is not a keeper of your blood. It has been closed 100 years because the last hand that could wake it died and left no daughter to knock. I could barely get the words out for the rain taste rising in me, flooding me. You did not stumble to my gate off the salt road by chance. You came home. The desert has been holding its breath for 100 years for you. She pulled her hand back, not in refusal, in fear, the plain, honest fear of someone told she is more than she has ever been allowed to be. No, she said. I'm a water carrier, I'm nobody. My whole life I've been the one at the back of the caravan. I find water and I hand it out and I don't get thanked, and that's who I am, that's all I am. I can't be a. I know, I said gently. I know it's a heavy thing to be handed at a dead well by a strange king. You don't have to lift it tonight, but hear me. Whatever you are or aren't, the wolves knew. The pup knew. The seep in the south wall knew. The stone knows. Every part of my dying kingdom has been running to you since you walked through my gate, and it isn't me telling you what you are. It's the water, and the water has never once lied to you, has it? She was crying silently the way proud people cry, hating it. No, she admitted. It never has. Then don't take my word, I said. Take the wells. At the full moon, 3 nights, I'll bring the whole court to the Nerwell. The doubters, the envoys who came to buy us dead, and you will kneel where your grandmother's grandmother knelt, and you will lay your hand where the mark is, and one of 2 things will happen. Either the well stays dry, and you are exactly what you always said, a water carrier who owes this hold nothing, and you may leave at dawn a free woman with my thanks and half my stores. I took a breath. Or the water comes. And everyone who ever put you at the back of the line will watch it come and know what they walked past. And if I don't want to kneel in front of a court and be gawked at, she said, wiping her face, fierce through the tears, and have it break and be a fool in front of the green men, then you don't kneel, I said at once. There is no version of this where I make you. Not a well full of water, not a kingdom of it, is worth your knee bent against your will. You choose Myron, you have always chosen. I only ask that whatever you choose it because you want it, not because you've spent your whole life being told to stand at the back. She was quiet a long time. The pup snored against her hip. The dead well breathed its dry breath up between us. Really let me walk, she said. Well or no well, I'd hate it, I said honestly. I'd feel it like a limb, but yes, I'd let you walk. What you are to me isn't a thing I get to keep by holding it shut. That's a cistern, you're a well, you have to be free to run or you're not what you are at all. Something moved in her face then, the thing under the tiredness, the thing I'd seen the first night, coming all the way up at last. Kaelin, she said. It was the first time she'd used my name without the Lord on it. The rain taste in me became a cloudburst. I'll kneel, not for the court, not to shame the green men, though, the ghost of the smile, I'll not pretend I'd mind. I'll kneel because I've spent my whole life certain there was water where everyone swore there was none, and being right, and handing it out at the back of the line, and never once getting to find out why I was the one who could always feel it. She wrapped her hand, the marked hand, around mine over the dead rim. I want to find out why. I'm done standing at the back. The full moon came up over Surivale huge and white, and it laid a road of silver across the dunes, and the whole of the reach came out to the Nerwell to watch their king make a fool of himself or a queen of a stranger. They filled the great open hall, my thin, brave people, wolves among them, Grey Sewer at the front with his head high. The green-clad Vachar envoys stood along their cool colonnade with the smiles they had worn for 3 days, the smiles of men waiting to write down the price of a dead thing. And at the well's rim, in a plain robe the color of dune shadow, she'd refused anything finer, said she'd not go to the water dressed as a lie, stood Myron with the pup at her heel and the moon on her marked hand. Whatever comes, I said to her, low only for her, you came home, even if the stone stays dry. Remember that when they look at you. You came home, and I'll spend the rest of my reign glad of it. Hush, she said, not unkindly. Let me listen. She knelt. She laid her palm on the worn spiral in the stone, the place where 100 years of keepers had knelt before the line went dark. She bowed her head to that faint, far sound. And the whole hall went so silent I could hear the moon wind and the pup's small, anxious whine, and under it all something else. Something waking. It came up first as cold. I felt it before I heard it, the dry breath of the well, that 100-year fever breath I had felt my whole life. Went suddenly, shockingly cool, a coolness that rolled up out of the shaft and across the sand and over the gathered people like the first breath before a storm. And I heard the whole court gasp as one throat, because every soul in that desert knew that smell, though most had never smelled it in their lives. The smell of water, deep and old and rising. Then the sound. A long, low singing, far down, coming up. The note the well had made empty, the mournful, dry note, but filling now, thickening, becoming the round, full-throated song of a living spring. Rising, louder. The carved wolves around the rim seemed to lift their stone heads, and the mark on Myron's palm began to shine, not fire. Waterlight, a soft, moving silver, the exact color of the moon road on the dunes, tracing the spiral of the keeper's mark on her hand. And then, I will swear to this before any god, the same light woke on my own hand, on the back of it. A spiral I had never carried, surfacing now like a stone, appearing as a tide goes out. The Alpha's answer to the keeper's call, the 2 lines finding each other across 100 dark years. Her hand shone, and mine shone, and between them the well sang, and I understood at last that the bond I had felt in the dry hall was never mine alone to name. The desert had been making it since before either of us was born. The water came. It came up the shaft in a rush, a silver braid of it climbing out of the dark. and it broke over the worn rim in a cool sheet that ran across the marked stone and over Myron's kneeling hand. And where it touched her, the moonlight flared bright enough that the whole court threw up their arms, and the sandwolves lifted their heads and sang, every wolf in the reach, the whole starved pack, throwing back their throats and calling to the moon and the water and the keeper, come home. And the water ran and would not stop. Spilling out across the hall floor, cool and living, 100 years of held breath let go at last, and my people fell to their knees in it and cupped it and wept and drank. And the children shrieked with a joy the reach had not heard in living memory, and along the colonnade the green-clad men of Vachar stood with their smiles gone off their faces like paint in rain, staring at the water they had come to buy dead, watching it run through the hands of the nobody they had laughed at, and not one of them found a word. Myron rose from the running well. Her robe was soaked to the knee, her marked hand still trailing its soft silver, and she was not crying now. She was laughing, helpless, astonished, purely joyful, and the pup was leaping through the water at her feet. And she looked at her own shining hand, and then at me and my shining hand. And she said, over the roar of the water and the singing wolves and her weeping, wild, drinking people, it was true. All my life, it was true. I went to her through the water. I took her shining hand in mine so the two spirals lay together, and before the whole court, before the ruined smiles of the men who came to bury us, I lifted her wet hand and pressed my mouth to the mark on her palm, the oldest bow the Asherin kings know, the keeper's honor, that no alpha in 100 years had had a keeper to give. Myron of the Nerwell, I said, loud enough for the last man in green to hear it. Water keeper of the Asherin reach, you came to my gate at the back of a broken line, and every part of my kingdom knew you before I had the wit to. The well is yours, the reach is yours. And I am yours if you'll have a sun-worn king and his foolish grateful pack, not because the water came, but because you'd have knelt at a dead stone all the same, for the truth of yourself, and let me watch. Stay, be my queen. Rule the water you were born to, or take half my stores and your freedom and go, and I'll thank the moon you passed through us at all. You choose, you always choose. The water ran between us. The wolves sang. She looked at me with the moonlight and the well light on her face, a water carrier from the back of a dying caravan, home at last in the place that had been holding its breath for her since before she was born. He stood at the back of the line my whole life, she said, certain of water no one else could feel and never once knowing why. She closed her marked hand around mine. This is why. I'll stay, Kaelin. I'll keep your water and I'll keep your fool pack and I'll keep you. The ghost smile came all the way out at last, unguarded, brilliant, but the pup's still mine. He chose first, I agreed, and the whole drenched, weeping, singing court of Suravale laughed with us and drank and lived. There is a thing I do now most mornings that no king before me could do, and I do it alone before the court wakes. I walk out to the Nerwell in the gray before dawn. The water is up to a hand's breadth of the rim these days. It has been climbing all this year, patient, sure, filling the deep old cisterns, running back into the seeps and the dry channels, greening the ledges below the hold where nothing has grown in 100 years. The sandwolves are fat and mean and glorious again. The Vachar envoys went home and did not come back. A hold with a living well needs nothing from smiling men. I go to the well and I find her already there most mornings because she wakes before me still. An old habit off the road, she says, a water carrier's ours. She sits on the rim with her marked hand trailing in the cool, and the pup, grown huge and ridiculous now, lies across her feet, and she is listening to the water the way she listened when it was only a rumor in the dark. Not for danger, just to hear it run. Because she spent a whole life certain of water that wasn't allowed to come, and now it comes and she likes to be sure. I sat with her this morning and put my hand in the water beside hers, our two spirals under the surface, side by side, the way the old records say it was always meant to be. Still there, I asked her the way I ask every morning. She tilted her head to that low full singing far down in the living dark, and she smiled without opening her eyes. Still running, she said, and it was.